What's up everybody, this is Master Ian Gamer. With the release of Vendetta marking the final new Overwatch hero of 2025, it's time to get excited for the new year and the new 2026 heroes we have to look forward to in Overwatch 2.
I am extremely proud and excited to finally and officially announce Kiriko 2.
Who's going to be joining the roster? What sort of kit and abilities might they have? And most importantly of all, will we finally be getting another tank hero? Well, today I want to take a look at some of the most likely candidates for new heroes that'll be added to the Overwatch roster in 2026, break down who they are exactly, what sort of role and abilities they potentially could have, and just generally talk about and speculate on what the future may have in store for us over the next year. So let's go ahead and jump right on in, starting off with the closest character we have to an officially confirmed upcoming new hero, being Wuyang's sister, Anran. Anran is all but confirmed to be a new upcoming hero. She's been featured in basically all of Wuyang's story content, including his animated short, where we saw not only Wuyang, but also Anran get invited to join Overwatch. She's shown to have her own combat abilities, wielding fire folding fans, which is a very cool weapon concept if you ask me. And even the devs themselves, historically, when talking about Wuyang and specifically his sister, have talked about her as if she was a character they were developing to one day be playable in the game. Granted, they haven't officially, definitively said in plain words that she's going to be added as a hero, but honestly, this is one of the safest new hero additions we've had in the Overwatch lore for quite some time. So, with all that being said, what exactly do we have to look forward to from Anran? Well, as I mentioned before, she is a not firebender, as in she's from the Fire Elemental College, the college which Wuyang had also wanted to get into, but he failed out of military school and had to become a doctor. So tragic. And Anran showcases her not firebending abilities in Wuyang's animated short. As I mentioned, her weapon appears to be folding fans, which is a new weapon type that would fit her very well and would be a really interesting mechanic to get added. And seeing as she seems to be an aggressive, fiery character, I think it is very safe to say that she is going to end up being a new damage hero. Now, I know that's going to stir a bit of contention, seeing as Vendetta, a lot of people were thinking she was going to be a tank hero, only for her to end up being a damage, meaning 2025 saw the addition of 2 damage heroes to the roster and 0 tanks. And while I would certainly love to get a new tank hero at this point, I do think, without a shadow of a doubt, Anran is going to be another damage hero. However, she isn't necessarily the next new hero we're going to see. Looking at how historically Blizzard releases new heroes, they add one officially to the roster every other season, meaning that we end up getting 3 hero releases per year, one in the early part of the year, one in the middle around summertime, and then the third and final toward the end of the year, leading into winter. And so, in the case of Anran, I could very easily see her end up being that 3rd hero edition of 2026. She's already a character that a lot of people know about and are hyped for to get added, so they'd certainly be able to play out that slow burn build-up, no pun intended, to her eventually getting added to the roster. And not to mention, with BlizzCon returning in 2026 and taking place toward the end of the year, that's a great opportunity for them to first officially reveal her in-game kit and abilities as part of BlizzCon. Either way though, regardless of when or how exactly they go about actually implementing her as a playable hero, I do think Anran is easily the most likely new hero candidate for an upcoming edition over this coming year. But moving on from Anran, the next character is one which many long-term Overwatch fans are certainly going to be familiar with, more so for his borderline meme status within the community as opposed to anything more serious on the lore side, and that of course is Emre Sarioglu, whose name I might not be pronouncing quite accurately, but forgive me, I'll just call him Emre. Emre is a character who we first learned about all the way back in 2018, where he served as arguably a red herring in the Brigitte teasers leading up to her hero release, where the teasers kind of alluded to him being the next new hero, only for it then to get flipped around and be Brigitte. But since then, we've seen Emre pop up time and time again over the years in various areas of the Overwatch lore. We know that he was yet another prominent member of the old Overwatch organization, being involved in various missions across the world and working with a number of different Overwatch heroes, with his primary primary focus within Overwatch being his involvement with search and rescue operations. This is where he came to be very closely tied with Freya, a hero who's already on the roster, before ultimately leaving Overwatch over the same reason most Overwatch heroes leave the organization: disagreements with how things are run. I gotta admit, he doesn't have the most original backstory from what we know about him as a character so far, but there are some very interesting details we can get into going forward. While he'd primarily served a relatively background role in the story, the release of Freya saw him once again come into the limelight, where we not only got a new look at his character in Freya's origin comic, but also in her own animated short. Much like how Anran was prominently featured in Wuyang's short, Emre had a somewhat subtle but ultimately pretty important role in Freya's, where we see that Maximilian is actually hiring Freya as a bounty hunter to find Emre, who's apparently been missing ever since he left Overwatch back in the day. This is pretty clearly setting up the idea of Freya finding Emre, which will then equate to us, the player base, seeing what he's up to in present day, and thus serving as his introduction to being a new hero. Now, there is one other interesting hero teaser tidbit, which actually may or may not have anything to do with Emre, but I theorize that it more than likely does, which is this tablet found on the relatively new Overwatch payload race map, Powder Keg Mine, that details a new chief of security taking up a position at the nearby Watchpoint Grand Mesa facility, a former Overwatch watchpoint that's now under the control of Helix Securities. I won't read through this entire tablet word for word because a lot of it I do think is fairly superfluous, but it does talk about an agent who's going to be soon taking the role of chief of security, with the name of course conveniently being redacted throughout this entire document. But there is one important portion here which I think may in fact be alluding to this being Emre. Performance in blank demonstrates great leadership potential. Quick thinking led to success in the blank recovery mission in blank, as well as the safety and security of civilians on site and Helix trainees blank, blank, and blank. Now at a glance this may just seem like random story filler tidbits, but considering what we know about Emre and his involvement in search and rescue operations, and the fact that he actually left Overwatch due to the fact that innocent civilians in one instance were killed due to the actions of fellow Overwatch agents, this feels very likely like it could be Emre taking up a new position in Helix Security, possibly under a pseudonym of some kind, where he's still able to enact those sort of safety and recovery operations that he had in Overwatch, just under a new corporation, basically. Again, just speculation on my part that this is referencing Emre specifically. For all we know, it could be some random other character who hasn't even been named yet anywhere in the official Overwatch story that might get added as a different new hero instead, in addition to Emre, or in place of him, who knows. But there is some interesting leaked information as well, which I would like to touch on, but I'm gonna hold that off until the end of the Emre portion of this video, because first I want to talk a bit about Emre's role. Unlike Anran, who I feel has a very clear-cut direction with being an upcoming damage hero, Emre, not so much. I could easily see him realistically being any of the three roles. The least likely role, actually, would likely be damage for him, seeing as Freya was also part of the Overwatch search and rescue operations, and she ended up becoming a damage hero in the game. So it might be a little redundant for Emre to be a damage hero as well, but I could easily see him being either a tank or a support. Support is perhaps a bit more likely, because I feel like that better aligns with what we've seen about his personality and his philosophy about prioritizing the protection of citizens, but that could very easily also end up being something fit for a tank hero, depending on the type of kit and abilities he ends up having. So yeah, a bit unclear here in terms of what direction Blizzard is going to take Emre as a hero in-game, assuming, of course, that he is going to be a new hero. Again, it's not officially confirmed that he is going to be added to the roster, but seeing the presence he's played in Freya's backstory and the build-up and the likelihood of the character alluded to with Grand Mesa being Emre, I think there is a very, very strong chance that he ends up joining the roster, and that could easily end up happening in 2026. Now, as I mentioned, there's some leaks to talk about, so if you don't want to hear any leaked information, if you don't like listening to leaks and you just want to hear the speculative content based on official stuff, go ahead and jump to the timestamp shown on screen to get over this portion. You've been warned, alright? Now let's talk about leaks. As I'm sure many of you recall, there was some major leaked information revealing Vendetta leading up to her release as a hero at the end of 2025. However, Vendetta wasn't the only character that had information revealed about them by this leaker. While the majority of their leaked information did of course pertain to her, he also mentioned an upcoming Freya and Emre comic. The details of this comic, as put simply in one of his now deleted posts, mentions Freya goes looking for him, finds him in a Helix security facility, only to see him with new cybernetic enhancements and working for Talon. Now this is a rather interesting tidbit here, because it actually lines up pretty perfectly with the information on the new Grand Mesa Chief of Security, seeing as Grand Mesa is now a Helix facility. An interesting caveat though of this information is that apparently Emre is working for Talon, which again is a very stereotypical direction for a character who was formerly part of old Overwatch to now be working for the bad guys, but also because we see Maximilian, a character who's very deeply ingrained in Talon, hiring Freya to find Emre, which seems a little strange if Emre is part of Talon. Presumably he's discreetly a part of Talon, and even if he is affiliated with them, he's likely working under a pseudonym so that nobody knows it's actually him, but just a weird little inconsistency there to keep in mind. Either way, another important thing to note from this is that based on the information the leaker had about Vendetta, it's likely that the upcoming Freya Emre comic is going to be releasing fairly soon. It wouldn't make much sense for them to have information on Vendetta specifically, and then randomly some comics slated to release a year later. So more than likely, I think we are going to be seeing Emre and this comic and his release as a new hero happen sometime in 2026. Maybe he won't be the first hero released in the year, but he could very well be the second. Either of those seem like very realistic possibilities. And again, no further info here about his role or abilities per se, but does lend some additional credence to the fact that Emre is likely to be an upcoming hero in 2026, even on top of all the teasers and information we've had for him via Freya and other story details over the past year or so. And this then takes us to the final major new hero teaser I'd like to talk about here in this video, this time talking about a different character, not Anran or Emre, but someone new, potentially. So back in Season 19, Blizzard discreetly added a little update to the Mecca-based Busan map, being this new screen featuring quite a bit of text, which, once translated, talks about a new effort in Mecca Squad's combating of the Kishin Omnics, who, for those of you who aren't as involved in the lore, the Kishin Omnics are the weird squid Omnics that keep coming out of the ocean and attacking South Korea. Diva and Mecca Squad are the ones who historically fight against them to protect Korea, and yeah, that's the gist of the backstory. And while the new information presented in this map teaser is fairly vague, the general gist of it is that scientists have developed a new type of EMP weapon that they think is going to potentially be able to take out the Kishin once and for all, and Mecha Squad is now gearing up to equip these EMPs onto their mechs and take the fight to the Kishin, who currently operate from the ocean floor. Now, unlike what we saw with the Grand Mesa teaser, this one doesn't give a specific allusion to any individual character. This feels like a broad new development when it comes to Mecha Squad as a whole, as opposed to focusing on some astounding new pilot they've recruited, or a certain Mecha Squad member stepping up to be the one to deploy the EMP. That sort of thing typically would be pointing toward an individual character that we're likely to see added as a new hero, but the absence of such from this teaser makes it much more ambiguous as for what exactly is being alluded to here. It might well be subtly teasing the addition of an existing Mecha Squad member onto the roster, someone like Overlord, Demon, or even Daehyun, the mechanic who works on Diva's mech, or it might be teasing a new Mecha Squad recruit, or someone a part of the science team who actually developed the EMP weapons they're going to use. Or, even more interestingly perhaps, it might instead be teasing one of the Kishin Omnics to in some way end up being a future hero. Perhaps this teaser is just framed from the perspective of Mecha Squad because they're the protagonists in this scenario, but then the actual hero that gets added ends up being some entity or being or Omnic they discover under the sea. Again, this is a very, very vague teaser. For all we know, this isn't even necessarily teasing a new hero specifically, but might instead instead just be focused on lore developments that generally apply to Mecca Squad? We're just gonna have to wait and see. But this is one that I do find quite fascinating, not only because of how recently it was added into the game itself, but also because of how vague it is and all the different possibilities it presents when it comes to not only potential new heroes, but also new storylines. So definitely I would love to hear your thoughts about this one in the comments down below. Now, it's also entirely possible that we end up seeing a total out-of-nowhere newcomer join the roster in 2026 as well. Historically, Blizzard has done a mix of total newcomers like Juno, Venture, Freya, versus established characters like Ramatra or Malga, and it's very likely that we see at least one of the new roster heroes coming this year, being someone that we really haven't had teased or showcased before. But, as I just talked about, I do also think it's very likely that we see some familiar faces showing up as well. And either way, I am very excited to see what all Blizzard has in store for us on the hero front. We'll for sure be getting even more teasers for whoever is in the works as 2026 progresses, so stay tuned for any future updates on my channel regarding new info on Overwatch heroes. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Definitely let me know your thoughts on all this in the comments down below. Are you excited for any of the specific characters I mentioned here making it to the roster? Or maybe you have your own ideas for cool characters that Blizzard could add instead. As always, be sure to subscribe, hit up that bell icon, follow me on X, and join my Discord server to hang out and never miss any of my future Overwatch 2 news, streams, and other content. That's right, streams. I do live stream every Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday on my main YouTube and Twitch channels, so feel free to swing by and hang out. We're always having a chill time there. And otherwise, this is Master Ian Gamer signing off, and until next time, have a great day.